I'm meeting people where they're at and with what they need, because that's what love is. Love means I want to reach to you, I want to be present with you based on what you need, not on what I need.
Welcome to the Crucible Project Podcast. The Crucible Project is a nonprofit organization committed to creating a world of men and women who live with integrity, grace, and courage, helping them to fulfill their God-given purpose. This podcast will discuss important and sometimes difficult topics while delivering practical life applications with men and women who are currently practicing this work. We are igniting Christ-like change in men and women through experiences of radical honesty and grace.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Crucible Project Podcast. I am one of your hosts, Jess Donovan, and today I'm so excited about this interview. I have my good friend and pastor, one of my favorite Enneagram 8s on the podcast with me. His name is Matt Furr, and I'm excited to dive right in. So, Matt, how you doing?
We're doing good this morning. Thanks for that intro. Now everybody knows I'm an 8. It's going to be expected.
Hey, I figured I'd just set the people up for success so they know right what they're getting into. And
Perfect.
I love that you're an 8. So, fun fact for the world, it's probably hard to figure out. I'm a 7, which is the enthusiast. I used to be scared of the 8 part of me, my 8 wing, but you have just helped me to step into that in great ways, probably sometimes dangerous ways, but we ride at dawn. Is that the phrase?
I think that's a pretty good one.
All right, so kicking it off hot. So we love to see it. But Matt, go ahead and tell the people a little bit about who you are, what you do, and all that good stuff.
All right. Yep, Matt Furr, and I am married to Heidi, who's a phenomenal registered nurse and professor of nursing. We together have raised 3 children, boy, girl, boy, who are all living their adult lives right now.
Come
And so while our
on.
nest isn't quite empty, we're entering into a new phase of our life that's been pretty fun to see, and feels a little bit like walking on a tightrope without a net. So
Yeah.
that's our life there. For the last going on 9 years now, I've been the lead pastor at Centerpoint Church right downtown Concord, New Hampshire. And so we are in the heart of this little city, which feels like a town most days, but it also comes with all the stuff of being a city. So everything from walking down the street and knowing the shopkeepers and our neighbors to waking up the people who are sleeping, having spent the night on our front porch here at the church, all comes with it. And so it's been a great church to be a part of. Like I said, been going on 9 years now, and just it's pretty exciting to see what God is doing here and broadly, and being a part of it.
Yeah. Man, that's so good. And definitely fun to be an up close witness to watching that journey. You and Heidi are some of my favorite people. And yeah, getting to watch your journey as a pastor here in New Hampshire. We like to say it's always exciting here at Centerpoint
Yeah.
Church. What was the journey like getting into pastoring? Like, what made you want to take on the role, and not only role, but life of a pastor?
Oh, well, yeah, I got to go back quite a ways for that. So I've been doing this
Yeah.
for quite a while now, going on 30 years altogether.
Yeah.
Um, and so from the time that I was young, like I was a kid, I had a sense that that's what I was supposed to do.
Mhm.
Not really a burning bush type of a thing, but just a sense that this is what I was supposed to be doing. But as I went to college, I kind of didn't want to, and so while
Mhm.
went to Indiana Wesleyan University, studied ministry, but also picked up a second major in political science pre-law because that's
Come
what I would have
on.
preferred to have done.
Yep.
Um, be an advocate for Christians, for the church, from outside of the church as far as leadership is concerned. But the more I tried to walk down that road, the more God just really bounced me back into the vocational ministry gig. Yeah, so it was really in college that got settled. And it came with a pretty strong calling to seminary. I kind of didn't want to do seminary. I'm not a stick me in a classroom kind of guy. I'm a let me get out there and do the stuff kind of guy.
Hmm.
But there was a strong sense of calling to seminary. And and with that was a strong sense of calling to Gordon Conwell Seminary here in New England. I had never been in New England, didn't know anything about Gordon Conwell, but it was like that was almost burning bush-ish.
Wow.
So my wife and I came out here, went to seminary. We got captured by the mission, culture, and history of what God is doing here in New England. Ambled around Buffalo, Chicago area, Michigan before slingshotting back to New England. But it's always been a place of burden for both Heidi and I,
Hmm.
like the kind of burden that comes in dreams. Um,
Yeah.
and God just would never bring us back. Like we didn't understand that. But he was preparing us and waiting for just the right time at just the right moment. And so here we are. And great ministry in other places, on staff at
Yeah.
larger churches, getting an up close view of kind of mega multi site, learning things along the way, building friendships and relationships. So, and that was even my initial contact with Crucible was back when I was
Okay.
serving a church in Chicago. Some men that were a part of my church. I was in close relationship with them, and so got to see them. They weren't hyper evangelists for Crucible,
Yeah.
but I had seen its impact in their life that made me curious. But it wasn't
Hmm.
until I came out here and was walking my own healing journey
Yeah.
in really intentional ways that Crucible was woven into that. So that was about 5 or 6 years ago now.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for sharing that journey. And man, just so many God pieces in there. And
Certainly.
even the shifting of desires and the spaces that you want. But I love how, even when you were talking about the route where you're like, this seems easier and more fun in college, was about advocating for others, was about being in that hard space with others and championing
Yeah.
them. And I know I joked a little bit about the Enneagram 8 part, but that is your gold in that space of the Enneagram 8 of who God even made and wired you to be. And so to see that take shape in the pastoral space, and I'm sure you could speak to this plenty, but it's not just preaching from a pulpit. It is a lot of messy, hands on
That's right.
space. And so I've seen you do that so well. And I'm grateful that God landed you in New England. I know we have a lot of Chicago listeners. So sorry, but not sorry. But we're super glad to have you over here. But I'm glad that our Chicago friends introduced you to Crucible. And I've talked about this a few times on this podcast, actually. You are the one who introduced me to Crucible as well. And that came with moments of me being like, what the heck is wrong with Matt? But after digging past all the pain and hard stuff of Crucible, I've found gold. So I'm curious. I know you said that you had heard about Crucible in Chicago and then kind of took it on here in New England in your own healing journey and had seen witness to what it did in those guys' lives in Chicago. So, what was it for you? What kind of made you want to get into Crucible? And then, what was that experience like for you?
I don't know that it would be accurate to say what made me want to get into Crucible. I wasn't sure that I wanted to get into Crucible.
Amen. Ain't that the truth?
So, uh,
Yep.
so it was intentional. It wasn't an accident.
Hmm.
But want to would be even a bit of a stretch. And so I had been doing some work with a counselor out here and seeing fruitfulness in that, unpacking family of origin things, my own sexual abuse and
Hmm.
uh, all the dynamics that come with that. So doing that kind of a work. Again, I had had the seeds planted of Crucible through some relationships in Chicago. Nobody really pushed it, but just I was aware of it. So then when my counselor, Tim, said, "Hey, I went to this thing and I think it might be helpful for you where you're at. Would you consider doing this?" So the seeds were planted, and I think Tim was kind of what pushed me over the edge. I was at a pretty vulnerable place,
Yeah.
in my journey, so I was pretty suggestible. And uh, so if Tim says this is a pretty good thing, and I was like, okay, I guess this is a pretty good thing.
Yeah.
And I'm certainly glad that I did, because
Mm.
it has been really important and powerful part of my journey.
Yeah. I wonder, what did you discover about yourself on that weekend, or what moments kind of felt significant to you?
came into that weekend pretty defensive.
Hmm.
The the fuse had been lit pretty early on in the process. All of that was actually a really significant tee up for what God wanted to do in me.
Yeah.
Having spent a lot of my life feeling dismissed, unseen,
Hmm.
that really my whole value was in how I make it okay for other people. So to walk through that weekend and have that exposed for what was an important piece, but also doing some key moments of work on that weekend, seeing that it could be something different, that God had wired me for something different. And not that caring for people isn't a part of that, but it didn't have to be that my only value was how I made other people feel and that I made other people's worlds okay, which allowed me to actually love people more effectively.
Hmm.
Because if it's all wrapped up in how they respond to me and me making it okay for them, because that's where my value comes from, then I'm actually not loving them. I'm trying to get something from them, which is
Yeah.
my affirmation. So when I could be much more steadfast in Jesus,
Hmm.
I could release that engagement with others and what I felt like was required of others so that I could just be present with others and love them. So it seems a little bit convoluted, but those were pretty key moments throughout the weekend that were a part of the work that God was doing in me.
Yeah, and I wouldn't say convoluted at all. I think that makes a lot of sense. And especially your gifting is the way that you see others. And so it feels like a double sided coin, right? Of
Yeah.
that's so much of the gifting of who you are. And of course, there's that flip side. We all have these shadow sides to us, and family of origin and all of those things play into it. But when your role in life feels like it has to be making other people okay. That's a pretty hard and painful space to sit in. Like making things okay for others all the time is difficult. And so it sounds really sweet that you were able to find your value beyond that. I wonder, in that space, was there any gold that you had found about yourself? Like the gold of what makes Matt Matt in that space?
Well, I think, as you were just talking about, so you take this shadow side that was well cultivated
Sure.
early in my life, and
Mm-hmm.
then let's go ahead and make a profession and calling out of it so that that's
Yep.
everything that I need to do.
Yeah.
Um, I've been well trained in those pieces. And so, one of the kind of a mantra that I received that weekend and have carried with me just is around the power of being seen and the power to see. And
Mm.
so I think being able to carry that into my family, first and foremost, of instead of me having to navigate my family in terms of, am I doing what I need to for them to be okay and happy and satisfied? I could actually more freely love my family
Mm-hmm.
and in the power of the Spirit see them.
Yeah.
Uh, um, was just a really good gift for my family. And
Hmm.
then carrying that into my church family,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's my engagements with the staff team, elders, and the congregation at large, has been really significant. And so that power to see,
Mm-hmm.
uh, because I know that I am seen, not even much by people, but God sees me. He is the God who sees. And so I've just really carried, sometimes I'll even wear a little wristband because I'm not cool enough for a tattoo yet. That just says El Roy, which
Mm-hmm.
is the name of God given to God by Hagar. It's one of I think the first time in scripture that a human names God.
Yeah.
And it was in her suffering that God saw her, met her, and she proclaimed, "You're the God who sees,
Yeah.
El Roy." So I have that on one side. The other side is Emmanuel, is the God who is with,
Mm-hmm.
God with us. And so carrying when I'm walking in that, right? Because we sometimes don't always walk in that, but when I'm
Mm-hmm.
walking in that, having the confidence that He is the God who sees, and there isn't anything that's being missed, and He's also the God who's with, which then frees me to see and be present with others around me.
Wow. Just a little mic drop moment right there. That's so powerful in being a firsthand witness to your life. I see that all over who you are and how you lead. And it is just so stunning to see, like, man, that realization was birthed out of a painful space. But it's this genuine space too of, wow, you are seen without having to perform to earn it, without having to hold other people in a space of giving you that value and validation, but simply just being seen is so cool.
It's been it's been really good for me. Other pastors who are listening probably will get this. Jess, you're in ministry, so you get this.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, it can be hard space to have really authentic relationships, not because I want to perform, but because people have expectations of performing,
Yeah. Yeah.
pastors and ministry leaders.
Mm-hmm.
And so I remember I was young, I was in my 20s, and I was an associate pastor, and I preached one particular weekend and just preached my heart out, right? I brought
Yeah.
everything to it, and I felt good about it, and having the conversations afterwards that along with the nice message, pastor, blah blah blah, but having some real conversations. And then this older congregant walked up and she looked at me and says, "Oh, you just look so nice in your coat and tie and shoes."
What?
And what just dawned on me in that, oh, she needed me to look a certain way in order for her world to be okay. And I sort of
Yeah.
equated that to just having really good drapery. Like the drape needs to sit just right in order for you to feel like the living room is working. And while there probably is an uber cynical side to that, there also
Sure.
is truth to it. Of
Mm-hmm.
people just need the pastor, people just need their ministry leader to just look a
Mm-hmm.
certain way, talk a certain way, to kind of meet certain expectations. They really don't want real engagement, but just the drapes have to be hanging just right,
Mm-hmm.
kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And so for a bunch of my life, I lived in the cynicism of that
Mm-hmm.
and the burden of that, where more of late there's a freedom that I get. Like, okay, that's true for you. That's fine. And while I'm not going to work overly hard to act the part that you want me to, I can acknowledge that I must really frustrate you when I don't meet those expectations. Is that something you'd like to talk about? And sometimes it is, and sometimes it isn't. But
Uh,
so anyway, just kind of
yeah.
our listeners, and you get this, Jess. Like,
Mm-hmm.
that's just a dynamic we have to manage as
It
ministry
is.
leaders.
It is. And how do we undo that in ourselves, right? Because that
Yeah.
expectation, yes, others are absolutely going to put it on us. If they see us from a platform, they have a certain expectation of what that's going to look like. Or I don't know, maybe there's rejection there. But how do we hold that in ourselves to say, like, even if they don't like the drapery that's going on, even if I don't meet their expectations, is that okay? I mean, you look at the person of Jesus, there was a whole lot of expectations that he broke, and his drapery was not all that in a bag of chips. And still, who was he? Like, I mean, you look at the identity there. And so it definitely is a hard role to handle and sit in. And there's a lot of even continual disappointment and rejection that can happen. And this work is really like layers and layers of an onion. And so I appreciate you saying, like, yeah, I even just recently are becoming okay with this realization and switching my expectation around it, because it's a continual piece of work. It's not like you go on a Crucible weekend and you're like, praise the Lord, all of my rejection issues are solved. We're all set, throw in the towel, but it is continual space. And so really to those spaces of being able to be seen, as you talked about, like, all right, I gotta have my spaces where I can just be real and authentic are so important. I was just at a dinner table with a friend earlier this week and had the conversation of like, all right, so this is Jess's ministry hat coming off, and can I just real talk it here? And honestly, sometimes that has to be a question that you can ask of like, okay, is this safe space for me to real talk it almost like setting up expectations of, and if not, that's okay. I will put this hat back on. But knowing your people. And so something that I've loved hearing in your Crucible journey is your walk with other pastors. And so what has that been like for you to journey with other pastors? In this space of being seen.
So it was that my first time staffing that I saw beneath the water line, and I was like, oh, there's some really good stuff here. And so through that experience, and then I was invited into a group. It wasn't a
Yeah.
pastors only group, but it was an online group that worked with my schedule for the most part. And then I was reached out to. Crucible was trying to do some work around bringing pastors together. So I had a couple of guys that I'd staffed with, but from other areas of the country, that made some reaches, say, hey, we're thinking about doing a pastor group. And so that was what convinced me to do the group. And then I connected with the pastors, and it was virtual, but it was really good. And it was one of the reasons that I was able to survive the pandemic and the turmoil of our church that you're aware of, Jess, over the past several years. It's been brutal, but that Crucible group with pastors was a huge part of what God used for me to have the resilience that was necessary to lead through that. And then these other men that are Crucible guys, but even before I really connected with Crucible, were places that I was just Matt. I was never Pastor Matt to them. They were a huge part of that for me also. So yeah, that was how I connected with the pastors group.
Yeah, that's great. And I mean, what a great space for you all as pastors to be able to connect and do your own work. Because as you said, it's not all rainbows and butterflies. There is a lot of turmoil that happens. And I just watched you walk the turmoil road beautifully. It was very painful and brutal, and you did it with such grace. But it was through your own wrestling. And so, kind of on that journey, on the space of the turmoil and leading a huge group of people, like pastoring is no light thing. Why do you think it's important to take care of your own emotional health in that space?
And have been convinced of this for a very long time, even before Crucible,
Yeah.
that the gift we offer is who God is alive in us. We can't offer what we don't have.
Yeah.
And we can for a little bit of time, but it's really gross to do that. And so it's not coming from a place of like, well, I've got it buttoned up, so here I can give you something, but
Sure.
it's actually God, I'm inviting God to do an authentic work in my life. Therefore, I can help create the space for you to experience God that way too. If ministry leaders, probably any kind of leader, is going to lead well in ways that are seeing the kingdom come in our midst. And when I talk about the kingdom, it's not just about what God does in church world. The kingdom is
Right.
coming all around us. And so it means in the restaurant that we own, it means in the business that we work for, all those places, the homes where we live. If we're going to see the kingdom of God come, then as pastors, it's kind of us first. Like,
Yeah.
and we need to do that work, and we need to decide whether or not we believe the kingdom is in our midst and is good, and if we will live a life of repentance and belief uh, through the call of Jesus. So it really begins there, and is so crucial to, I think, healthy, impactful kingdom ministry. Again, we can fake it for a time,
Sure.
um, and in counting on the grace of God to cover our gaps isn't about faking it, but it is a recognition of God's grace, and He does absolutely cover our gaps. But who are we as we come to the table? And if it's a performative thing, then we've got congregations that will clap and boo sometimes at the same time. And I think that's one of the reasons that the American church is experiencing such a comeuppance these days, is because we've had this almost unholy alliance between pastor and people, where the pastor will do his song and dance, and the people will clap, and then the pastor dances more, and the narcissist dance continues, and the people clap as long as they get what they want. And it's just this really unholy alliance that doesn't breed kingdom transformation. And so as pastors in particular, I think it's incumbent upon us to be people that are sitting at the table
Mm-hmm.
where we're inviting others to sit. And that was one of the images that I got over the last 7 or 8 years. I'd always kind of felt like I was the one who was setting the table of the feast and inviting people to come and eat and take your fill and flourishing and grace and mercy, come and eat. But then I'd go back into the kitchen and eat my peanut butter and jelly sandwich that I brought from home.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really experiencing that invitation, and Crucible was a part of it.
Yeah.
That invitation of the Lord. It says, no, no, no. I've set the feast. You come and eat too. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
not just a feast that I set for others in ministry. It's a feast to which I'm invited also. And so I think I've tried to lead and would want more and more of my peers in ministry leadership to lead from that place of we are fellow feasters at the table
Mm-hmm.
that He has set for us. And while there is a role that we have in beckoning others to come
Yeah.
and setting out the feast, we also are partakers,
Hmm.
and the feast is for us too.
Yeah.
And that was really a big move for me in seeing that.
Hmm. Yeah, that's so good. And I just want to take notes and go back and listen. That's such a huge deal, being able to not only set up the feast, but receive it yourself as well. And so part of being able to share well is being able to receive as well. And so having those spaces where you are receiving, where that Pastor Matt hat is off and you're able to just be Matt is huge. And then also those spaces
It
of,
really is,
yeah.
and so the Crucible group again was huge. All of
Mhm.
us show up as we are. We show up as men,
Mhm.
and that was just a really important time for each of us to be able to sit at the feast. And sometimes it was with laughter, and sometimes it was with weeping, but to learn to be present wholeheartedly,
Mhm.
which then I was able to translate into the other arenas. And while wholehearted living and leadership might look different in those settings,
Mhm.
because not everybody gets everything
Yeah.
of Matt. Not everybody wants everything of Matt, even if they say they do. Like, you said you sit at the table, you say, "Hey, I'm going to take my ministry hat
Yeah.
off for
Yeah.
a moment. Is that okay?" And people are going to say, "Oh, yeah," but it doesn't take long into the conversation before you realize, and I'm not saying you did with them,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
before you realize, oh no, they actually no, they just need me to. So okay, pastor hat back
Uh-huh.
on,
Uh-huh.
and that's fine. That's a part of the calling.
Yep.
That's a part of what it means. But I can even bring wholeheartedness into that,
Mhm.
even if it means that I'm meeting people where they're at and with what they need, because that's what love is. Love means I'm going to reach to you, I'm going to be present with you based on what you need, not on what I need. So I'm not doing this so that I can have affirmation. I'm doing this out of love for you. I'm not doing this so that I can get more people in the seats to keep my job. I'm doing this because I love you.
Mhm.
And so the wholeheartedness in the places that are mutual and authentic translates into wholeheartedness into the places of leadership. But I think that wholeheartedness needs to characterize our leadership. So whether again people are listening on in ministry leadership, I would want you guys to go, yeah, yeah, yeah. That's what I'm doing. That's what I want. And for those of you who are just volunteer leaders in the church, to say this is the leadership culture that I want to be a part of in my church. And if you're a part of a church that is frankly just performative,
Mhm.
part of my hope in sharing some of those things is that you might look for something different,
Yeah.
so
Yep.
that it's a place that welcomes wholeheartedness.
Mhm. Yeah, wholeheartedness. That's such a good way to put it, and such an important piece. And I think that as you were talking about, like, I'm going to sit at the table too, it's those kinds of leaders that I have been led by who have been the most impactful. I can maybe remember sermon from a talented speaker, but it's the relationship that is so huge and so important. And so that really builds trust in both spaces. And so something else I want to hit on is you not only lead in the space of church, and you talked a little bit about this, but also leading in the space of your home. And something that I have loved seeing and loved witnessing is the way that you speak blessing over your kids and lead them. And I know that Heidi did this experience with Liberty as she was finishing high school, of blessing her as she goes into womanhood. And I got to witness and be a part of that. But you've done that with your boys as they enter into manhood. So I'd love it if you'd talk a little bit about that and what that looks like. Maybe giving some ideas of what it can look like for our listeners to bless their children. And maybe it's even spiritual kids, but what has that looked like for you?
It's been a growth place for me. I was struck with the idea, engaged with Robert Lewis, was leading a church in Little Rock, Arkansas,
Hmm.
wrote a book, Raising a Modern Day Knight. And in that book, he talks about manhood, and other cultures have more overt inductions into manhood
Mm-hmm.
than the American culture tends to. And so we leave our boys to figure out when they're men, and usually it involves something around having sex, buying a car, and
Yeah.
having money from a job. So
Yep.
when those things happen, then I'm a man. But nobody's really saying, "Hey, here you're a man." So that was even before I had kids, and so I'd kind of locked it away
Mm-hmm.
that if I ever have kids, if I have sons, I want to be really intentional about helping them know what that journey is. And so God has given me three great kids. Two of them are sons,
Yeah.
and so as I really wrestle with those things for in my own life, I wanted good things for them. Part of my journey also included doing some ministry in Kenya, where there's just real intentionality about manhood, and there's ceremony, and some of it we're not going to, mimic here.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
but the boys know when they're welcomed into the circle of men.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was
Mm-hmm.
watching as I saw that happen there. So it continued to stir my thoughts here. So when my boys turned 16, they're not twins, but each of them, when they turn 16,
Yeah.
there's a particular day where I say, okay, on this day, I own you. Like, it's not for your friends or anything. You just wake up in the morning, and
Mm-hmm.
I get you that day, but I don't tell them what it's going to be.
Yeah.
Beforehand, I had planned out that there would be four men who were a part of my life, an important part of my life, and they would be men that would be along this trail up a mountain,
Hmm.
and that we would create this manhood journey for each of my sons. And so my son and I get in the car, we drive up, we get to the parking lot, and then when we get there, I explain what's about to happen, and I say, you're going to be taking a manhood journey today, and you're going to meet four men, and these men are going to talk to you about different aspects of what it means to be a man. And then I'm going to leave you, and I will see you at the top.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not too far off the parking lot. The first man is there. And so I leave my son and I continue to walk on. And then that guy takes 10 minutes with my son talking about a different aspect of manhood.
Hmm.
And then he walks him to the next man who's waiting on the trail, and then leaves my son with that man. And that guy walks up to the top
Hmm.
and joins me there. And so what happens is the last man walks my son up to the top of the mountain where all of us are there. And so then we do a little manhood ceremony that involves prayer over. We carve our name. There's a board. We don't carve it into trees, but there's a board there where people makers carve their initials, that kind of thing. So I give him a knife, and he carves his initials into that board.
Hmm.
And then there's a Maasai weapon that I bought each of them when I was in Kenya and had been saving for this particular trip, that
Wow.
I give them, and give them the meaning of what that is and what it means to be a part of a community of men. And when they're 16, the journey is you're coming into manhood training. So you're not yet a man.
Mm-hmm.
Make that very clear too.
Mm-hmm.
But we're going to talk about manhood in some fresh ways because of this. I want you to see my community of men, and until you develop a community of men, you can borrow mine.
Wow.
And which you need, these men make themselves available to. And then we walk down the hill together. So it really is it is a moment that marked both of them
Wow.
in a really significant way. It marks me as a dad in a really
Mm-hmm.
significant way. But it changed the conversations that we had.
Hmm.
And so it's not a conversation like clean up your room because you need to clean up your room. It's a conversation of, hey, I want you to keep your room tidy because a man takes care of his space. part of being a man is taking care of others. And if we can't take care of ourselves, then we can't take care of others. So the conversation is about what does it mean to be a man? Well, that's why we clean up our space. And it's received differently, it hits differently, and it sets up a conversation. And then when they turn 18 after they graduate from high school, we take that same journey, but it's just me, just the two of us.
Wow.
And so we stand on the mountain and we look, and it's beautiful. It's a bald mountain. So here's the vision. But you're going to get lost because when you're on the top of the mountain, you can see forever and it's
Yeah.
inspiring. But then you get down into it and you get lost in the trails. And so it's a conversation about what do we do when we get lost?
Yeah.
And how do we find our way home? Again, it's been really impactful for all of us to walk that journey. And my boys know. My daughter does too. But my boys know my voice and they know what to listen for. I don't know that I have confidence in all the choices that they're making. Some are like, well, I don't do it that way. But I know for a fact that they know I love them and they know my voice. And they still orient to that, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
So that's been rich. Like I said, not just for them, but it has been for me too.
Yeah.
And as I've been able to give that gift to them, and it wasn't even just in those are big moments of blessing. But I also have small moments of blessing along the way because I want that to be my voice for them. Even in correction, there's blessing. So it's been good for me because I didn't get those things.
Yeah.
And so to be able to offer them to my sons, it weaves me into blessing. I don't know if that makes sense.
It
But
does.
it
Yeah.
allows me to not only give it, but to receive it and to be woven into the goodness of the fabric of blessing.
Yeah.
As a man.
Wow.
So.
Oh my word. That is just it's rich. I love that you use that word. It really is rich and it's such a tender space. And so thank you for sharing that. Like that is so personal and profound and really just really sweet. And I actually didn't know that you did the boys experience with that at 16. I had it in my head at 18. And so, yeah, has just blown my mind a little bit in hearing wow, that makes so much sense of you set them up at 16 with this group, with this protective space of, hey, these are your guys to do hard things with, to, deal with the stuff of life with, and you're in the safety of this group. And that's so huge. But then to continually invite them into manhood. I love that you said, we didn't just bless them and then be like, all right, go figure it out. But it's this continual walking with, this continual shaping and building. And even at 18 to then say man, I'm going to walk with you in this space. And P.S., you're still going to get lost in the woods, I think is so great and huge. But really that space of, and you alluded to it a little bit, of not just saying all right, you want to be a man, here's the checklist to being a man. You get the car, you get the girl, and all of those things may change at some point. And all of those things are temporary, but knowing that space of tribe, of community, of blessing is so huge and has really helped to even shape my idea of blessing and the significance of it. And maybe someone's listening and they're going, oh man, why didn't I get that as a kid? And I can speak for myself, that's some of my journey of oh shoot, I wish I had that. And you alluded to it too of, wow, that wasn't my journey, but to shift it into going, wait, I can start that journey of blessing right now. And I can start pouring that into someone else, B, finding the spaces where I can receive that blessing. Something else that I love that you and Heidi do, and we've done as church staff now as well, is even at birthdays. So maybe it's not this pivotal birthday, but it's a birthday along the journey, is speaking a word of what you see in someone else and doing the thing of encouragement. What is encouragement? It's literally speaking courage into someone else. And I'll say, I'm a words of affirmation person, but I know how each of those words has landed. And so being able to share that blessing is so huge. So thank you for showing and leading the way in that. Matt, I'm so grateful for this time with you today. If you could leave the listeners with any last words, what would that be?
Yeah, I think it is, particularly when I walk through hard space, one of the questions that I ask myself on the other side is, was I who I wanted to be?
Mm-hmm.
Because when we're in tense conversations, we're in difficult space, when we're feeling accusation come against us and we feel defensive, we become who we don't want to be. We just react.
Mm-hmm.
And and so one of the questions that I ask is was I who I want to be? And the more I do my work, the more my answer to that is, yep. Like that conversation really sucked, and I hated the way that it went, and I don't think it was fair. But I was who I wanted to be.
Mm-hmm.
And if I were looking on the outside, watching, I'd say, yep, that's that guy. That's the man I know Matt to be. And so that's how I want to increasingly show up in wholehearted ways, being the man who I want to be. So and whether it's at home and difficult conversations with my wife or with my kids, am I the man I want to be in leadership when it's hard and challenging and accusations are coming? Am I present in this moment as the man that I want to be? And the more that I do my work, the more my answer is yes.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what? That's nothing that nobody can take that away from me.
Yeah.
You can take my job away from me. You can take my platform away from me.
Yeah.
You can even leave me as my friend. But if I can walk in who I believe God has made me to be and who I want to be as that man, all I can do is give that away. Nobody can take that away.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's who I want to be. That's who I encourage others to be. And a crucial aspect to that sort of steadfastness is the work that we do, whether it's in Crucible or with a counselor or in a
Mm-hmm.
community of authenticity. Do that, get that, find that.
Oh, that's so good. Was I who I wanted to be? What a beautiful way to end this, Matt. Thank you so much for all of your wisdom and just sharing life on this podcast today.
Well, and I love being able to walk with you, Jess, and have you a part of the team here, but even more than a part of the team, you are a part of my family, and that's a gift to us. So appreciate you a ton. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, ditto all the way. All right, listeners, it has been sweet to be together. Until next time, we'll see y'all later.
For more information about our weekends, please go to thecrucibleproject.org. Or if you're ready to get started on your transformational journey right now, you can connect with one of our Crucible certified coaches for a free 30-minute session at thecrucibleproject.org/coaching. That's thecrucibleproject.org/coaching. If you like what you heard, connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Rate and review wherever you are listening, and don't forget to subscribe on your preferred podcast platform. Thank you for listening.